Hey, everybody. JJ Cooper, Kyle Glaser here. Happy Major League Opening Day to everyone. Exciting day for all of us. Kyle, it's a virtual holiday for you. I know you're getting ready to head to the ballpark out west. You got a couple of hours because you are out west, but happy opening day, Kyle.
Happy opening day, JJ. I do think this is, for my money, the best day of the year. Some people pick Christmas, some people pick Thanksgiving, some people pick July 4th, and absolutely, respect to everyone who has their favorites. But I know this is mine, and I think that sentiment is reflective of a lot of the larger baseball community, especially those of us here at Baseball America. It's hard to beat opening day.
It really is. And I can't help but feel like, every opening day is significant, but this is a significant opening day. This is an interesting opening day. For one, we have all 30 teams getting ready to play, which is a lot better than I say the format where we've had, where it's like, okay, no, you're not on opening day. You're on opening day version 2 that we've had for many years. But on top of that, and I think we have to ask about it, we have to talk about it, which is we also have significant rules changes this year. Some rules changes that even if you are a casual fan, you will notice these. This is not the same thing as, oh, by the way, now instead of taking the catcher and asking him to move his arm out and catch 4 balls, you just do a motion and he goes to first base. These are real. These are significant. What are you looking forward? What are you looking to see from the first official day of implementation of some significant new rules?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, the pitch clock is the biggest rule change of all, and we've been reporting on it extensively at Baseball America for the past 2 years, being out west here in Southern California. I was writing about it in 2021 when they put it in. It was called Low A West before they changed it back to the California League and how it was working then. We saw it expanded to all levels in the minors last year, and it continued to work. Between 18 and 31 minutes were shaved off the average time of a 9 inning game at every level of the minor leagues last year. And then we saw the early results in spring training this year as well. I think as we move into the regular season, we're just going to see a better pace. We're going to see games that just move a lot more quickly. And you're going to be amazed at how many games you look up at 9:30 and it's over. The game went 224, 228. The players are going to love it. Managers are going to love it. Fans are going to like it. And it was interesting seeing kind of the conversion over the course of the last 2 years. A lot of crusty old baseball types who are definitely of the purist mindset. Even they, after a few weeks of watching games with the pitch clock, were like, yeah, I'm in on this. It just made for such a better experience, really, for everyone in the ballpark. And I think over time, we're already seeing some of the resistance slipping away. I think it's going to be eradicated by summer.
The thing we saw at the minor league level is players adjust. To me, that was the thing that, again, we've seen this a lot. We've been to a lot of games that have had pitch clocks over the last couple of years. And especially last year when we had, you were seeing Low A West / Cal League 2 years ago, but especially last year when we had kind of overall implementation around minor league baseball. The first month, you saw some rocky moments. You saw some moments where players, hitters, pitchers had to adjust. You saw moments where umpires had to adjust. But the thing that we saw is as the season went along, that kind of faded into the background. And the thing that you do notice, I made a point whenever I was at minor league games, I would try to ask some fans, what do you think? Not, my own. Again, I hear that people are going to think that we're pro pitch clock because, well, you go to a lot of games and you get paid and you're tired of baseball and you want baseball to end quicker. I don't want baseball to end quicker. But if you tell me, I do believe personally, having seen a lot of games with the pitch clock the last couple of years, especially last year, if you give me a choice between a sauce and you can get me all the ingredients, all the flavor, but with some of the water boiled out of it, it's going to be a more flavorful sauce. When you look at these major league games, when you looked at the minor league games last year, we didn't see fewer home runs. We didn't see fewer hits. We didn't see fewer pitches. But what we did see is you subtracted out a lot of standing around and adjusting batting gloves or staring at the catcher and then stepping off and then getting back on. And you can say, well, that's part of the game I love. And if it is, then you are not going to enjoy this. But if you say that's not really the part of the game I love the tension of baseball, but also the action of baseball. Well, all of that's still going to be here this year. The difference will be is that we are going to watch, I would say probably 20 minutes, maybe 25, get reduced out of most games without reducing any of the actual on-field action. And
that's
like
the
you said,
biggest thing.
Kyle, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and people are saying, "Oh, it's less baseball." It's not less baseball. It's less dead time. And we've seen over the last few years the average time of a 9 inning game continually increase. In 2021, it was the longest ever, 3 hours and 10 minutes. And it's something where that trend of longer games with less action was a bad combination for the future of baseball moving forward. And this should help the game just become more sustainable long term. I think that's something we all want to see. The thing that really jumped out to me is it's not just, the average games that are being shortened. The disaster games are being shortened. I just go back to, there was a game last August between Ranch Cucamonga and Modesto I was at covering for us. The game featured a combined 20 runs scored, 17 hits, 4 errors, 8 hit batters, 14 walks,
8 hit
2
batters.
wild
Wow.
pitches, and a balk. I mean, just an absolute disaster game. Want to know how long that game took? 2 hours and 56 minutes. That's a 3 hour, 45-minute type of game previously. I mean, again, just as a baseball writer who has covered the majors for years and years and years and years now, I can't tell you how many games I've been to where it's August and it's the Padres and the Reds back when the Padres weren't contending, and it's going 3:30 for some reason. Like, no reason at all, and everyone's miserable. The players hate it, standing out there on defense. The coaches hate it. I mean, no one likes it. And this gets rid of the disaster games. And I think that's what we're really going to see. And that's just what stood out to me. That game will forever live in my memory of, it was a horrendous game by any measure, and it still came in at under 3 hours.
The other thing that I'm going to be interested to see, though, is I do believe we also are going to see more stolen bases this year than we've seen at the major league level in many a year. Major league teams, we are coming out of, well, the home runs are starting to dip, but we have been in an era where home runs are relatively cheap, which means that caught stealings are relatively expensive. But on top of that, you now have a system with fewer fewer times that you can throw over without it. If you throw over a third time and you don't retire the runner, it's a balk and he automatically advances to the next base. You're going to see more base stealing with that. That's much more important, I would say, that and the pitch clock than the bigger bases. But more base stealing. We obviously are seeing the shift rules, changed as well. You have to now have 2 infielders in the dirt on either side of second base. These are all, again, major significant changes. But I don't want to go overboard on that. We've been talking about those a long time.
There's
go
one
ahead.
thing
Go ahead.
I do want to hit on. So we've talked about the pitch clock. Look, it works. It's going to work. There's no doubt. You talk about, bigger bases. It might make a little difference. Mostly we'll see it base-related injuries are going to go down. The pickoff limitations, that's going to lead to a lot more stolen bases. All these have been proven to work in the minors. We saw the early returns in spring training, and I think they're going to continue to work. The shift bans are the one rule where if you actually look at what happened, it was not the panacea that I think a lot of Major League Baseball officials hope it will be in terms of more hits, more singles, especially for left-handed hitters. We saw in the minor leagues pretty consistently when they first put in Double A in 2021, batting average on balls in play didn't increase much at all. You go when they expanded it all across low A, high A, and Double A in 2022. The batting average on balls in play actually went down in low A and high A with shifts being restricted. Double A went up a little bit, but nothing more than the usual variance. They tried it in the Arizona Fall League 2021-2022. It didn't make much of a difference on batting averages and balls in play. So this is the rule that I'm really interested to see what the effect is in the majors, because it didn't work in the minors. It didn't lead to the desired result. The caveat is teams shift in the minors a lot less than they do the majors.
Right.
This is the one rule that I'm going to be watching the most closely to see if it actually does have the desired effect. Again, we're going to see more athleticism from middle infielders, which is a positive thing, but this rule change was more about the aesthetics of the game than the fundamental change in what it's going to look like in terms of, we're going to see batting averages back up to 260, 270 like we did in previous years, as opposed to 242, 243 we've seen recently. We don't have the evidence that that's going to happen based on what happened in the minors. So this is the one I'm going to be watching the most closely and most curious to see how it plays out in practice.
But so now I do want to ask you, though, looking at the season as a whole, there's been a lot that's happened since even spring training began.
Yeah.
I'll start with, what do you think is the team that you're more concerned about now than you were when spring training began? Is there a team that you're like, I felt like they were in a really good spot, but whether it's because of poor performance or more importantly, because of injuries, you're now concerned about where they're going to be this year?
I'm going to go against the grain here a little bit and actually pick the Padres. And the reason I say that is this is a team that has a tremendously loaded lineup, especially once Fernando Tatis Jr. comes back. The addition of Xander Bogaerts, a full season from Juan Soto if he gets back to his previous form. But the starting pitching depth was incredibly thin. There was very, very, very little margin for error. That was true when everyone was healthy. You have Joe Musgrove drop a weight and break his toe. Yu Darvish, just with the WBC, wasn't able to get up to full speed. This is a team that has a lot of talent, but they have very little margin for error in terms of injuries or underperformance from the starting rotation, particularly their top three. So, Musgrove now being out, and he should come back fine, but you never know. Darvish not being, up to speed, more starts for Seth Lugo is not a good thing for the Padres. They don't really have pitching depth. I mean, Jay Groom impressed in camp, but we've talked about this. Teams need 11, 12 viable stars to get through a season. The Padres, if you're being generous, I mean, 7 is the max. And I think that's if you're giving it to Nick Martinez, Seth Lugo, and Jay Groom, who have not proven it as starters. So I think I'm a little concerned in that already their starting pitching depth is a little lesser than you'd like it to be. And if it gets worse, I mean, I do have concerns we could see a repeat of 2021, where by the end of the year, they had to pull off Vince Velasquez and Jake Arrieta off the scrap heap when they had nothing left. And that was why their 2021 season tanked. They ran out of starting pitchers, viable ones, I should say. So that's the team I'm a little concerned about. And just seeing how Musgrove and Darvish come back and how quickly they come back and get to full strength, it's going to be pretty important for the franchise, just with all the hopes and dreams they have this year.
Okay, now let's flip it. Is there a team that you look at right now that you're like, oh, I feel a little bit more optimistic about this team now than maybe I did, say, a month and a half, 2 months ago?
Well, it was going to be the Angels with the way Griffin Canning was coming back and throwing, but then he went on the injured list with a groin strain, and that's been the thing with him. If he's right, that gives the Angels potential number 3 caliber right-handed starter, which they don't really have. Yeah, I'll say this. I was decently high on the Yankees coming into the year. I thought they had a really good offseason in terms of re-signing Aaron Judge. I thought was the most important move any team made in the offseason. What he means to that team is enormous. Signing Carlos Rodon. Obviously, losing Rodon and Luis Severino to injuries hurt, so maybe this is a bad pick. But I think Anthony Volpe kind of stepping up and taking the shortstop job was a really promising development. It's no secret shortstop has been a disaster for the Yankees as a position since Didi Gregorius left. So I think the idea that they now have a guy who is stepping up and taking the position and potentially solidifying it for them was a really promising development. Again, it's hard to say they're the team I feel best about given they suffered injuries to some key starters, but I thought that development was really important for the Yankees, both in terms of this season and moving forward into future years.
I'll actually say with that, one team that I'm just a little bit intrigued by, and I want to get what your impressions are the Diamondbacks. Not that I think that the Diamondbacks are going to win the NL West. I do not come close to thinking that. But I do feel like that this is a team that is probably, like, we all talk about the Orioles and how they're on the upswing. I think the D-backs are also a team that are very clearly on the upswing. Obviously, Corbin Carroll, I think Brendan Pfatt's going to be useful for them. There now looks like Ryan Nelson could be a useful reliever for them this year. But what are your impressions of that team, since you also are paying very close attention to the hey, shout out. We have a special guest.
Well. I apologize. Let me get him out of the office. I apologize. He opened.
No, that's all right. I'll keep going while you're doing that. To say, like, I do think that the D-backs are a team that, again, is not going to battle the Dodgers or the Padres this year, but I do think is going to show a step in that direction to potentially be able to compete next year or the year thereafter.
We've seen teams kind of arrive a year early before, right? I think about the Braves. They were our number 1 farm system 2017, 2018. The thought was, okay, they might need another year, 2019. They arrived in 2018. They were a year early. I do think that potential is there for the D-backs. And the reason I say that is I think there's a lot of focus on their position players, and there should be. Look at Corbin Carroll. And, if Alec Thomas in year 2 could take a step forward, that'll be huge. Jake McCarthy was a pleasant surprise as a rookie last year. The addition of Gabriel Moreno in a trade was nice. But to me, what jumps out is actually their pitching. Zach Gallen is kind of an underrated ace in the game today. Merrill Kelly did not look good in the World Baseball Classic. How much to read into that, I don't know, but he had a solid year last year. But I like the young arms they have. You mentioned Ryan Nelson. He won the 5th starter spot. Dre Jameson looked great when he came up last year. He could open in the bullpen. You have Brandon Pfaadt behind him, and you have some more arms beneath them in the minors just waiting. I think this has a chance to actually be, a solid rotation that kind of helps them stay competitive throughout the course of the season. And it's a lot of young guys, as I mentioned. You're relying on guys to stay healthy and be effective and make the transition. So there is risk here. It's not a guarantee, but I do think there's enough arms in this rotation. And especially we saw Madison Bumgarner be better last year under Brent Strom's instruction. If he can at least be solid again, as opposed to, he really struggled in previous years. I think they have a chance to be competitive and maybe take that second wild card spot in the NL. It wouldn't surprise me if we look up at the end of the year and, they've won 86 games and they get that last wild card spot. Again, they need Madison Bumgarner. It's funny. I thought he was better last year than he actually was. His ERA ballooned up to 4.8 at the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something where, though, the young pitchers that they have intrigue me enough where I could see it happening. I'm not going to pick it, but I can see it.
Apologies. I think I flipped Ryan Nelson and Dre Jameson when I was talking earlier. So my apologies to the viewers on that. But the other thing that I did want to also just touch on today is that we also are in an unusual year, because we now are in a situation where usually we have kind of a gap between Major League Opening Day, Minor League Opening Day. AAA Opening Day is tomorrow, which is earlier, quicker than it is. But I do think it's probably worth us also touching on today the pretty momentous news that happened last night, which is that there was an agreement between minor league players who are now unionized and Major League Baseball on a new collective bargaining agreement. Final approvals still are to be done, but everyone expects those to happen. And Kyle, as someone who's been covering the minors for quite a while, like I have, can you kind of summarize to people just the significance of this, just of kind of where we are now on minor league baseball and where we are compared to where we were just a few years ago?
Yeah, I want to go back to my very first full-time professional job was covering the High Desert Mavericks for the Victorville Daily Press in 2011, 2012. And I remember a very talented young pitching prospect had gotten called up from low A. And when he arrived, all the host families, their homes were full. And this player was not a high draft pick. He was not someone who received a large signing bonus, and he could not afford to find a place to rent on his own. So he slept in his car. He lived a few states over, and so he was able to drive his car to California, and he slept in his car in the parking lot. This was an affiliated professional minor league pitcher at high A with a major league club, and a good one at that. And it was just frankly ridiculous. And that was one of many stories. I remember another prospect who had really, really jumped that year, was a later round pick. He became one of the organization's, best young position players, and he eventually got to the majors. He also didn't have a car. So what was happening was the high draft pick on the team, who did have enough money to get his car shipped out, would drive around and pick up, as many teammates as he could, had 8 guys in his, 5-seater. And the stadium, if you've ever been to Atlanta, was at the end of this dusty 2-lane road with a lot of semis driving by. I mean, it's a car accident waiting to happen. And here was 8, really good prospects, including one really good one who was being forced to ride in basically the trunk of the SUV with no seatbelt down this bumpy 2-lane road. Like, at any point, a semi could have hit them and killed them all. It was just ridiculous. Players' lives were literally being endangered. They were sleeping in their cars, affiliated professionals and good players too, who reached the majors. Those days are done with this. Again, it's not a lot of money. It's not a ton of money, but guys can afford to eat now. Guys can afford to, sleep in a safe place. Guys can afford to, hey, even if it's just taking Uber. They could not afford to take Ubers before. That $20, they needed that to feed themselves. So I think in that sense, this has created a safer, better environment for minor leaguers. That's my biggest takeaway is, I mean, these guys were literally living in conditions that were frankly unacceptable for anyone in the United States of America, but especially working professionals for billion-dollar companies as teams are. That's what I'm going to take away from this is these guys can now at least have a safe, again, live and sleep safely, which it's not hyperbole to say they could not do before.
It's funny when you said that, it made me think back to when I was covering the Macon Braves years ago. And there was the club he would go and would pick up like 8 to 10 players in his pickup every day and bring them to the ballpark. And so you would have future major leaguers, like 6 of them in the bed of a pickup truck. And just because that's the only way they could get to work every day. And that was the environment. That was the situation. And that was just considered normal. And the other thing that just stands out with this is that it's been this way. This generation of players, and I was talking to Garrett Brocious, who was an attorney now, but a former minor league player who was an instrumental in this. But he was just making the point about how much credit this generation of minor league players deserves, because they have, through action and through the work with others like advocates for minor leagues with Harry Marino and Garrett Brocious, and the lawsuit that got them back wages and all that. But in the span of just 4 years, basically, they have gotten more improvements to their working conditions than minor league players did in the 50 years before that. If you were talking about a minor league player in 2012 and they were talking to a coach who played in the 60s or the 70s in the minor leagues, there were some differences. Like the minor league coach from the player in the 60s or 70s might have had a nail in a closet, and that was his locker, in a very tiny locker room. And maybe the hot water didn't work. There were improvements, because we did see improvements, especially in the 1990s, as far as facilities. But when it came to per diem, when it came to salaries, when it came to housing, all those things, it all stayed the same. And now, from basically 2020 to now, minor league players now have housing is covered in season by major league teams. Food is covered in season by major league teams, and clubhouse dues have been banned. Now salaries are not, they got a 200% in more increase in this CBA, but that's over the salaries that went up in 2020. In 2019, a player in the complex league could make less than $3,000 over the course of the entire season. And by the way, they weren't paid for spring training and extended spring. Now they're paid, and they're making roughly $20,000, which still is not a ton, but that's $20,000 plus essentially room and board in season and health insurance all covered. So the differences of now versus just 2019 are astronomical. There was some give and take in this, as there is in any CBA. Major League Baseball has gotten the right to reduce the number of players on the minor league rosters in the domestic U.S., not the Dominican Summer League, from 180 to 165 beginning in 2024. But I don't want to, if someone tries to equate that to what happened in 2020, they're very different. Yes, in 2020, Major League Baseball eliminated 40 teams, which is 1,200 jobs. This time, this will be 450 jobs. But there's a very big difference between a collective bargaining agreement where the two sides give and take, and it's like, we're going to take 2.7 roughly $1 million in wage increases per year per organization for the reduction of 15 jobs. That's a massive difference from in 2020, when it was unilaterally, we're cutting these teams and you have no say in it at all. It's not just a historic week for minor league baseball, especially minor league baseball players, but it is also the start of a new era, because going forward, all of these things will be collectively bargained and not unilaterally imposed.
And again, this is something that I know folks around the game have been talking about for years. Can the minor leaguers join? Can we find a way for them to have some sort of representation? For the longest time, a minor league union was a pipe dream. And the fact that it's a reality today and it's able to negotiate on behalf of the minor leaguers to get them, again, just call them fair wages, even just basic living wages. It sounds like something that's so basic and should have been a given, but it wasn't. And you're right. We have seen more transformative change in the last 4 years than took place in the 50 years prior. And I think it's something to be applauded. I think you have to give credit to all the organizations out there who helped make this happen, all the people out there who helped make this happen. And again, hopefully this is a step forward. Again, we've talked about $20,000 is not a lot of money. Even $35,000 is really not a lot of money, but it's better than what was happening before. And this is the first one. It will only go up from here. This is a first step, and it's a positive first step. And I'm very, very happy for a lot of the players out there. And I think too, teams are easily going to recoup this money in terms of, player value. Guys who had to retire early before, not because they lacked talent, but because they literally could not afford to play the game. Now they can stay an extra year or two. Now they can maybe take that jump that everyone sees coming, but just needs another year of seasoning to happen. I think we're going to see better player development outcomes for teams. We're going to see players just, frankly, in better physical condition because they're eating and sleeping better. And it's going to be a win-win all around. So it's something that was long overdue, and I'm glad it finally happened.
Well, we're going to wrap this up because we are T-minus, I believe, like 5 minutes till the start of the 2023 Major League season. And Kyle's got to get ready because, again, are you heading to Dodgers? Where are you headed to?
I'm heading to Dodgers same time, so I got some time. It's a 7 p.m. Pacific night first pitch, or 7:10, so I've got some time.
I'll be able to watch most of that game and still get to bed, hopefully at a decent time. So win-win for me as well, because that's 10 o'clock East Coast. 10 o'clock to 12. I can 12:30. I can do that. 1:30. I'm going to be hurting a little bit in the morning. So for Kyle, I'm JJ. Thank you for joining us on this Baseball America live stream. And if you're watching this on replay, we hope that you have enjoyed opening day of the 2023 Major League season. So long, everybody.